Right, so I'm Jennifer Giambi, Pastel Giambi. I'm 37, I'm about to be 38. My molestation, I guess you could call it, happened, it will be 30 years ago this year, about. I was 8 years old. The person who molested me was my best friend at the time's father. Her name was Tabitha, and we were very, very close friends. I was in third grade at Humble Elementary. At that point, we had moved around a lot. I had never lived anywhere longer than about a year and a half, just because my sister was sick. We lived with my grandparents, and then we moved around with my mom's boyfriends, whoever my mom was dating at the time, that's who we lived with. So at this time, we were living in Humble. We had kind of settled, and I'd been able to make really close friends, and I had become friends with this girl, Tabitha, and she lived in this, what I'll never forget, and I believe it's still there, this beautiful, like, historic home that was from the 1800s that's still in the middle of Humble today. It's one of the historic sites in Humble. So her house was like the house that I would go to, and we would hang out and we would play outside. And she and her 4 siblings, which were 4 girls, lived with their dad. Single dad. I don't really know what happened to her mom. Even if I knew what happened to her mom, I have forgotten. There's a lot of stuff that's been blocked. So one night she was having a sleepover for her birthday, and it was just a typical night. It was me and her and a couple of other friends, and we were just playing around, and her dad was telling us, one thing that her dad did was he had us recreate the final dance scene from Dirty Dancing with him, which at the time was fun, but now if you think about it, it's really fucking creepy.
Yeah, it's inappropriate.
Yeah, it's just inappropriate. You've got 7 and 8-year-old girls, and you're, watching Dirty Dancing with them and then trying to do the lift, and it's just, now after years of therapy and looking back, I realize how, I thought he was just the fun dad, but really it was just a way to get his feels in, I guess, in a way. So he first started out doing that, and then he decided to tell us a ghost story about the house, about how the house was haunted, and he would look out the windows and see like ghosts like walking across the yard. And I'm a sucker for ghost stories. I love them, but they scare the shit out of me, and of course I'm frightened. I'm an 8-year-old girl and just scared shitless. So he decided to offer to sleep, to have me and Tabitha sleep in the bed with him since we were so scared. But I remember getting in the bed with him, and he insisted that I slept in the middle between him and Tabitha. And I mean, whatever, I didn't know anything. I mean, you're innocent at that age. You don't think beyond, and you shouldn't have to. So we go to sleep, and I wake up in the middle of the night, I have no idea what time it was, to him with his fingers inside of me. And it was, I can't, even to this day, I can still, I mean, it's been 30 years, and I can still feel like I was completely frozen. I have never felt that in my life. I could not move. I felt like I couldn't even breathe. It was awful, and it's just like he's just fondling me and fingering me, and I have no idea what's going on, but I know my body, my brain is telling me that it's not right and this is wrong and I've got to stop this. And somehow, some way, I was able to come out of whatever paralysis that I was in, and I had the wherewithal to wake Tabitha up and just say, let's sleep on the floor. I'm uncomfortable. I want to sleep on the floor. I don't know. I can't remember what I made up, but I was able to get her on the floor, and he pretended like he quickly moved his hands and pretended like he was asleep. And we went to lay on the floor, and I never really went back to sleep that night. I just kind of laid there. I remember pretending to sleep when he woke up, and he like left, and I think he left for the day, like to go to work or do something. And we were all left there. Her sisters were a little bit older. And I just remember calling my mom and just telling my mom, like, I'm ready to come home. Can you come get me? And she came and got me, and I never saw Tabitha again after that. Like, she was my best friend, and I just stopped wanting to go. And then my mom decided we moved at that time. So we moved down to this is when we made the move down to the Galleria, and that's basically where I ended up spending a lot of my time. And honestly, I didn't think a lot about it after it happened, because the thing is it happened at a time in my life that I had already been dealing with a lot of trauma. Because I don't remember the exact date that it happened, but only a few months before it happened, my sister had died. So I was already, losing my sister is the most traumatic thing I've ever gone through. It was horrible. She died February 1st of 1991, and I'm pretty sure this happened right after that, a couple of months after that. So when I think back on that time, I really don't have a lot of memories other than my sister dying. I remember the funeral. Apparently my mom sent me away after my sister died to be with our dad, because she was trying to deal with her own grief of losing her child. I have those memories and then that memory, and that's it. Like, my brain just, after years of therapy, I've realized that my brain has needed to protect itself and just shut down. And apparently that is what happens. So I didn't think about it a lot until I was 14, and I started having a lot of anger issues, a lot of acting out, and I was having, I've always suffered from night terrors, but I had them more when I was a younger child. They started really happening again when I was at 14 or so. And I had become really good friends when I was a freshman in high school with this girl named Roxanne. Well, Roxanne had a pretty tragic and traumatic experience as well, dealing with the fact that her brother had been physically molesting her for years, sexually molesting her for years. And she had opened up to me and always wanted us to stay away from him, just, to protect her friends, to protect herself. But she never told anybody. Because she told me, I decided to open up and tell her what had happened to me, which is why I think I started to have the nightmares again. I started having the acting out because I acknowledged what had happened to me. She tried to kill herself. She tried to kill herself when she was 14 by taking a whole lot of ibuprofen.
But we all at some point reached that level.
It's not, obviously it was less of a suicide attempt and more of a cry for help, honestly. Yeah. So I remember being in the hospital, and I was alone with her in the hospital room while my mom was out in the hallway talking to her mom. And she's crying and I'm crying, and I told her, I'm like, you have to tell your mom, you have to. Like, you can't keep going like this. This is horrible. And no 14-year-old should ever be having this conversation with their friend. No 13-year-old should ever deal with what you dealt with, So what I did was I made a deal with her that if she told her mom, I would tell my mom. And we would do it together, and we would bring them both in the room at that time before we could back out. I just kind of championed this and was like, we've just got to do it. And the only way that I knew that she would do it is if I did it with her. So we did. We brought our moms in and we told them, and it was devastating and it was heartbreaking. And our moms, now being a mom, like, I can't even imagine, you feel like you just failed your kids. Like, how did you not see that? But I mean, there's nothing they could have done. So right away after that happened, my stepdad is a police officer. He's now a lieutenant with Harris County. So right away, my mom got to action. This is definitely where I get it from. It's just like, okay, we've got to take care of this. We're going to find him and we're going to prosecute him and we're going to do all of this stuff. So they start the process and, you know, like, okay, whatever. They put me in therapy. I've been in therapy since I was 5. So in and out of therapy. I was in therapy for parents who were divorced, therapy for siblings of cancer patients, therapy for siblings who have died from cancer. You know, it's just like, so this was just another round of therapy for me to go talk about, you know, my molestation. They went through the process and they found him living in Louisiana with Tabitha and her siblings, but he was in jail because they were having a pool party and he tried to do it again to one of her friends and one of their friends, but she told right away and he got put in jail. And as it turns out, not a shocker now if you think about it, but he molested all of his daughters. I was not the first, I was not the last, but before anything could happen, he killed himself in jail. So that was almost like worse than actually being molested, because I had finally like gotten up the nerve to talk about it and do something about it. And I think it also made my mom feel like she was going to have a little bit of closure. And he took, in my mind, he took the easy way out. I mean, that's just easy. That was easy for him instead of to face the music. What I've just realized is that it changed the entire trajectory of my life and who I was as a person. You know, I went through high school. I barely passed high school. I don't know. It changed everything. It changed how I handle my relationships with men were always, I mean, it dramatically changed my relationship with our dad. Yeah, I don't cry anymore talking about what happened. I've dealt with that. I've dealt with the actual act, and I've, you know, kind of relived it over and over again throughout therapy and having to tell people I'm close to, because I'm very open about it. What is still an ongoing journey and will always be is just unpacking the after effects of it, unpacking the psychological effects of it. Like I was saying, you know, it dramatically impacted my relationship with our dad. Growing up, when I was little, I was very much a daddy's girl. You know, my dad was my everything. I worshipped the ground he walked on, and I used to be, after it happened, he would, you know, because my parents were divorced and he had every other weekend, he would have to pick me up, or my mom would drop me off at Discount Tire and I would just wait there on a Friday night with him, and then we would drive home. And he had a really bad habit of like drinking beer at night, and we would like sit behind the Discount Tire while he drank beer and shout the shit with his friends, and then we'd drive home. Very upstanding to do. But I would be, I remember when my dad would be like, I'm gonna take this shortcut, you know, small road home, dark road home, or whatever, country road, I would be so apprehensive. I would be so scared. What's going to happen? Even though, like, logically, I knew my dad wasn't going to do anything to me, but it still, because of what happened to me, it created that caution, that paranoia in my head. And that's stuck with me my whole life. It created a mistrust in men, in people in general, but mainly men. Once my dad found out, once my mom, told my dad what happened, he was so uncomfortable. Obviously I know he was heartbroken by what happened, but he was also so uncomfortable about how do I react to my child, my daughter, who's gone through this. He just pulled back. He was already a hard guy to kind of get to, but he pulled back even more, and that really started the change in our relationship. And our relationship afterwards, from my teenage years on, was very, very contentious. Probably one of the hardest aspects to deal with is having that contentious relationship with my dad. And I was convinced, because my parents had me at such a young age, that dad was 19 when I was born and my mom was 17, that I would have my parents forever. And obviously I don't. Dad passed away, and it still wasn't great. It wasn't a great, fabulous relationship, and I struggle with that. And I put a lot of blame on that. There are other, obviously, factors that go to that, but I feel like that was the changing point.
Yeah, so I guess I can relate to that on like so many levels, and I feel like it just affects your relationship, like in general, with men, and how you approach situations, and like getting like stuck too close to like the opposite sex for too long in a certain space that you don't feel protected automatically puts you back to when you were a child, back in that situation so fast, where it's like this is full panic mode, right? And and that's kind of the whole point of this, is everyone has their own experiences, right, in the whole thing, and maybe someone will relate to your story and how you approach things. Yeah. What advice would you give someone if they had like a similar story to yours? No, everyone has their own individual stories, right? But someone who was as young as you, because I think age has a huge factor in processing things. Because you're right, there's certain things in mine that I've just totally like blocked out, and then people are like, do you remember, like, I witnessed this, like I saw this, I was around, I saw that text message, or I was there when he did this, or whatever else, and I'm like, holy crap, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is to not compare your story to anybody else's, and not to diminish what happened to you because someone else may have experienced something worse. So that's something that I struggled with for a very, very long time, because I wasn't raped. I wasn't physically penetrated or held down, or it doesn't, when you talk about it, it's like, oh, he just put his fingers inside her and, whatever. I struggled with that for many years, that almost like my assault is not good enough kind of aspect of things. And I shouldn't have all these issues, and I shouldn't have these mental health problems, and I shouldn't have these struggles because mine wasn't that bad. And that's all bullshit. But that's your trauma talking to you. That's your PTSD talking to you. And everything that anybody ever went through is completely valid, and your story is just as impactful as someone else.